Not too long ago, I made a video about picking and all the things that I learned, all the techniques that I learned throughout the 40 years of playing that I've done so far, and I wanted to share them in the video. I will link that in the description. Today's video is about bending strings, and I'll go from the very beginning, like somebody that has never figured out how to bend a note on the guitar, to things that are a bit more advanced. So check out the timestamps if you want to just skip ahead. Yeah, let's just go straight to it. Okay, let's start from the very basics of bending a string. And when I mean bend, I mean this. Just basically taking one note or fretting one location on the guitar and then pulling the string up by plucking at the same time. And it gives you that kind of vocal bend from one note to the other rather than sliding or hammering on. Okay, this is quite basic. You can do it with one note, two notes, and so on. We will see all of this. So the basic idea here for the complete beginner is to fret a note, and right after you pluck, while you're pushing down, squeeze your thumb and ring finger together, like this, so that you're pushing the string up. Usually you bend with a ring finger, but you can do it with any finger. You know, if you have the strength, you can do it with any finger. And again, something that is used quite a bit, you will see a lot of rock players that make basically of three fingers one, and we will see later when I will add the rake what I mean with this technique. I'm basically pushing these three fingers together so that I have more strength, so to speak, to squeeze against my thumb, okay? So this is the basic idea behind bending. And again, another thing that I can add is that you can bend upwards, and usually you bend upwards in the three thinner unwound strings, okay, and downwards on the three wound strings. But there is really no rule. You can do, if there is space and you don't fret out, if you don't push the string out of the fretboard, there really isn't any rule, especially depends what you do. Let's say if I'm playing something like, you can see that I can bend downwards both times, or upwards and downwards. Okay. There is really no rule. It's all down to experience. Rake and bend. So rake is basically when you are going through the strings with your right hand, you're plucking, you're picking the strings. It has this kind of thump sound. It has this kind of rhythmic, percussive sound. You do this by, usually people do this by flattening their index finger over the string very gently, and then bending, fretting and bending the note on the ring finger. And there's a difference between this sound and this sound. You can hear that kind of slightly more guttural, percussive thing. Okay, so that is done by flattening your finger, your index finger, over the strings, but not pushing down. You're not fretting the strings. You're just muting them by gently putting the index finger over. You can hear now I'm fretting just that note with my ring finger, but I'm adding that percussive sound. And you can hear this in many, many blues players. They do this, and especially David Gilmour and many other ones, many other players. It's a very common technique. Again, as I said, you can bend with any finger. You can bend with your little finger if you want, ring finger, index finger, and if you have the strength, index finger. Okay, this becomes quite useful when you do double bends. So you bend one note and then another following that one, like. This is very common, like Jeff Beck plays this if I'm thinking of E major or E7. I know that the pentatonic is right here. and I'm bending the blues note, the flat 5, and then the minor third, G to G sharp, the major third. So I'm bending, reverse bending into the flat 5. That classic Jeff Beck fake slide lick, so to speak. So you can see that I'm bending with my ring finger first, and then upwards with my index finger. Okay, this is all on the B string, 11th and 8th fret. You can use this technique for many, many different things. But the important thing is the intonation. And I have a few exercises that I want to suggest, because you usually bend to a target note or as an effect. And I will explain this difference. Like the first one is microbends. So because obviously the smallest distance you can have on the guitar is a half step that is fretted. A microbend is a note in between. So there is a half step of a half step. Let's say a quarter, a quarter step, whatever you want to call it. I call them microtones, okay? Because you can also bend in between. You can bend more than one step between half steps. So that's more of a color. If you're playing blues, you have these microbends just to add more of a vocal feel to what you're playing. The next thing is you have to try to bend to a target note. So the first note, I'm going to again bend on the B string of that A on the 10th fret, and I want to try and target the half step above, and I want to do it in tune. So this is my starting note, and this is my target note. Then I want to target a whole step. I can bend up to that note, or bend the string and try to hit that note, which we will see in a minute, okay? These are all slight differences. You can hear the difference. Then I want to bend a tone and a half. Very common, David Gilmour and many blues players do this, the bend over the whole step. Okay, obviously you have to have a guitar that allows you to do that. Or you can go even further than that. That's more like a color in a way. You want to exaggerate that bend and get people to, in a way, be surprised by that overbend, so to speak. Get them to feel something. This is like target practice. An exercise that I usually suggest for people to do is to play a major scale backwards. Let's say from C. I'm here on the B string, 13th fret. I'm playing a C major scale backwards. And so I'm going to play that first note and try to bend to that diatonic note with the previous, with a note below. So I'm going to go from B to C. I'm going to play that B and go from A to B. And play the A and go from G to A. And the whole exercise sounds something like this. That is the exercise. That's the first exercise. You can go, in a different direction, but that is the basic exercise for targeting notes, for intonation. And you can do it with a chord. If you have a looper, you can get a chord underneath, or something like one of those freeze pedals to give you a bit of reference what the intonation is. Or you can do it in a scale where you can have like an open string, let's say like A. Obviously, you need to have a fixed bridge for that. And so on. So you have a bit of a reference, so to speak. The next thing is the direction and the type of bend. So the first one is the just bending to a note. Okay, so I'm bending upwards to a note. The second one is reverse bend. So I bend upwards and I bend down to a note. Then I will have a pre-bend, which means I pre-bend with a plucking, and then I try to hit that note. And I can do all combination of these things so that I can have random variations of more of a vocal sound. So I have a forward bend, let's call it that way, reverse bend, free bend, or so I am bending, plucking, bending upward again, and then bending downwards. This is again very common, the stuff that Jeff Beck does. And you can do any variation, up, down, up, or pre-bend, down, up, down. Okay, and many variations of these kind of forward and reverse bends. That was just to do with single note bends. The next thing, I want double bends. And what I mean with double bends is I play two notes. You know, you hear them a lot, like Mark Knopfler does this all the time. Basically, what you're trying to do is to play two double stops, but by bending the note first from the lower one. Mark Knopfler would probably use a volume pedal. I have one plugged in my pedal board. And you recognize this. I've covered some of these techniques in another video, and I will link it in the description, you know, the Mark Knopfler thing. There are different examples that I can make of double stops. The first one is, let's say, on a classic E-shaped bar chord, you can bend, you know, the top two notes. So on the B and G string. This is quite a common lick. Or again, if I go down here to like E with a bar chord. Okay, so I bent the A and C sharp on the G and B strings up. And then I played an E on the D string. And then I bent the G and B flat up to G sharps and B natural. Okay. And then another thing that you can do is bend sixths. This is classic pedal steel kind of playing. Again, we're still in E. It's a bit easier when you play faster, obviously, because there's a lot of sliding. But basically, I'm plucking the B on the G string and the G sharp on the E string, and I'm bending them up of a half step. And then I'm basically just continuing the sixths, A and F sharp, G sharp and E. Classic pedal steel licks. Another thing that you can do, this is more like Southern rock, you know, when you have, you know, the pivot note with your little finger on a string below, and on a notable, the string below, whatever you want to call it, and then bend the bottom note. This is a classic Southern rock, or even country. And I'm basically bending the second to the third, the major third. And we will see in a minute, I will make an example when I talk about chords, bend with chords. a lot of people do that as well, which is basically you're bending the minor third to the major third. And I'm basically playing like an E triad here, like you would do here for E major. And I'm bending that minor third to the major third. Okay. And let me go back to the double stops for a second, because I want to add a couple of little things that are more like, again, because these all come from the pedal steel world, where you're holding one note at the top and then bending the one at the bottom. And these are the classic country licks where you're bending a note and then I'm holding that pivot note at the top and then releasing while holding that E at the top. In this case, I'm bending up the B string on the 12th fret of a whole step and then holding that E on the 12th fret on the E string. In this case, I went from the E to the D, bending that B. These are all pedal steel licks. You can do the same on the set below, between G and B. Okay, and these are all variations on double stops, okay? There is that very famous solo by Jake Radin, I think, where he slides and bends as well, double stops. Check it out. I think it's on Peg, a song called Peg by Steely Dan. That's a great solo to learn bends and double stops. Okay, so let's look at slightly more advanced things, slightly more advanced techniques, let's call it that way. It could be, simple stuff for some. The first one, bend and tap. Here you're trying to bend. Okay, you hear these a lot in people like Steve Lukather, Larry Carlton, and more in modern players to speak. Usually you're trying to bend over the pentatonic. Obviously you are, if I'm playing. Visually I'm bending, I'm trying to look for the pentatonic note. Okay, on the same string. And that's a very, very old school technique, so to speak, by now. I think a variation on that would be to bend and play the next note with your little finger. Larry Carlton does that, and Steve Lukather do this quite a bit. So I'm bending. I'm playing while I've bent that string, the next note with my little finger, and then I release, go back to the E. That's quite common. The bend and slide, actually should say slide and bend. The one that comes to mind first is Mike Landau. Mike Landau does this a lot, like. So you slide and double bend. So you slide, bend, slide, bend. If I add a bit of overdrive. So you can see you can become quite expressive when you do these kind of things, quite vocal, okay? So I'm sliding to that 15 frets and then bending up a whole step and then sliding again with the string bent and going to the next 2 frets up and bending again. Okay, and I can continue for as long as I like. And that makes things quite vocal, so to speak. I can slide in the other direction. Okay, And these are all things to make your playing a bit more expressive, a bit more vocal in a way. These are all techniques to add that vocal element to your playing. The last technique is bend on chords. And this again comes a bit from that lap steel, pedal steel, more like pedal steel world, where you play a chord and then you bend a string with your knee. So while you're holding a chord. So let's say if I'm playing G major here, I can bend the A to the B. Or I can do it from B flat to B natural. Okay, yeah, and you can do it further down. Okay, and I can do it in more conventional shapes like so in that case, I was bending from G natural. I'm basically targeting an E major shape. And I'm basically bending the B on the 12th fret, sorry, the G on the 12th fret to G sharp. And I'm sliding down to D shape, G sharp minor, B minor, and then I'm bending. Then I'm targeting an E shape here. So I'm bending with my index finger C to C sharp. And then I'm playing G sharp minor to F sharp minor. So this is kind of a bit of a rundown of that lick. I hear these things in like players that play with Steely Dan, and you can adjust this in many other areas here. So you can add all these little bends within chords. So you can see we've gone from single notes to double stops or 2 notes at a time to 3 notes at a time to chords. And that's about it, really. If you have any more suggestions or questions or anything that you want me to explore a bit further, stick them in the comment section. Well, I hope this video was of help to you. And as always, if you feel you want to share it, please do so. Like and subscribe. That's the thing that helps the channel the most. Share it on social media. Check out all the links in the description. If you want to check out my model patches, and thank you again to all that sent a donation for that. And if you want to just give a donation because you learned something, there's a PayPal link in the description as well. And again, if you want a lesson, I do teach online. Just check out the links in the description. It will be sent to my website. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.